I have to remind myself.
City Council for the City of Rollingwood will come to order Wednesday, November 20th, 2024 at 7 p.m. and we will begin with roll call.
Brooke Brown.
Alec Robinson.
Kevin Glassheed.
Phil McDuffie.
Sarah Hudson.
Gavin Massengill being quorum present, we will move on to the first items of business, the swearing-in ceremony of newly elected officials. Call up agenda item number 2, swearing-in ceremony of newly elected officials. Mayor Gavin Massengill, Council Member Sarah Hudson, and Council Member Kevin Glasheen. How do we want to start, Ms. Wayman?
Well, we have our judge here.
Hello, Judge.
So I thought we'd get right to it.
Welcome.
And then have some cupcakes.
All right,
So,
let's get this part out of the way. I guess I'm up first.
All right, if you'll raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Gavin Massengill,
I, Gavin Massengill,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the duties of the office of mayor
the duties of the office of mayor
for the city of
for the
Rollingwood
city of Rosewood,
of the state of
of
Texas,
the state of Texas,
and will, to the best of my ability,
and will to the best of my ability
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution
the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and laws of the United States
and of this state.
and of this state.
So help me God.
So help me God.
All right, we'll sign after.
Thank you so much. Sure.
All right, next I have Sarah Hudson. You'll raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Sarah Hudson, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of the office of council member of the city of Rollingwood of the state of Texas, and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state. So help me God. Congratulations. Thank you very much. And we'll sign. Okay. All right, Kevin, if you'll come up.
For sure. Wow.
All right, you'll raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Kevin Glasheen,
I, Kevin Glassheed,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the duties of the office of council member
the duties of the office of council member
for the city of Rollingwood of the state of Texas,
for the city of Rollingwood of the state of Texas,
and will, to the best of my ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution and laws of the United States
the Constitution and the laws of the United States
and of this state.
and of this state.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
With that, we will take a 5-minute recess, and I'll call up agenda item number 3, bunt cakes. Okay, City Council will come back to order at 7:10 PM, and we will move on to agenda item number 4. Oh, that is agenda item number 4. Moving on to agenda item number 5, nomination and election of the Mayor Pro Tempore for a term of 1 year and to perform the duties of the mayor in the mayor's absence. I will be happy to continue with a nomination of the dean of your council, Ms. Sarah Hudson. If I could have someone, is that my motion to make, or do I need a motion?
No, you can make a motion, there's nothing that prevents you from doing it.
I move to nominate Mayor, I need to move to nominate Sarah Hudson to be Mayor Pro Tem.
Second.
We have a motion by myself and a second by Ms. Brown. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Being 5 ayes.
Abstain.
Oh, abstain. Being 4 ayes and 1 abstention, motion carries. Thank you, council. Congratulations again, Mayor Pro Tem Hudson. Moving on to public comment. Anyone here wishing to make public comment on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will move off of public comment and on to presentations. Agenda item number 6, presentation on residential participation with the Eye on Water customer portal and discussion of the benefits of participation and ways to encourage and increase participation. And I will recognize Ms. Wayman and also recognize Ms. Hudson.
Would you like to start?
I can.
Okay.
So recently, I had a personal experience with our Eye on Water, and also I'm aware of a resident who would have been well served had they had Eye on Water. I kept getting an email. I had set up a leak limit, and kept getting an email saying I had exceeded the 1 gallon per hour leak limit, like 1.2 gallons an hour. I'm sort of going, what is going on? How is this figured? Nothing's leaking. I don't know what's going on. I finally came up, and then it would say the leak's gone. I finally came up and talked to Veronica, and she looked and she said, okay, it is showing that you have 1.2 gallons all day long. And I went home and I went into the guest bathroom, and the toilet was just very, very slightly running.
Right.
But the meter was sensitive enough to pick that up.
Wow.
And so I just turned the water off because I hardly ever use that bathroom. But we also had an incident where a resident did not have a leak limit set up in Eye on Water, and happened to have somebody out working at their house and discovered wet spot in the backyard. And when they dug down, they found that the service line going into the house there was a break in the service line, and the water was going down, so it was not obvious. And the usage for that particular month was 198,000 gallons of water.
Wow.
I mean, I don't use that much water in 4 years. I mean, that was 1 month's use of usage, and if they hadn't had the workers out there, who knows how long it would have gone, because they didn't notice anything. So I had asked how many people we had that had actually signed up to have an Eye on Water account and had set the leak limits for their personal usage, and it's not very high. What was 130 or something?
134.
Out of 600 accounts?
Correct.
So that's less than a quarter of the accounts that we have. It's very simple to do. You don't even have to check your account, because it will send you an email if you are exceeding the leak limit that you get to establish yourself. And I was also thinking that because we now have this available, we don't really need to be giving people adjustments for leaks. If there's a method for you to be alerted if there is a leak, and you choose not to avail yourself of that, and you have a leak, maybe you should be paying for that water. That's not ideal. Ideally, we want everybody to sign up so that they can find out if they have a leak, so we are not wasting that water, which is a limited resource, and getting more and more,
Paying for it.
well, getting more and more precious as, you know, the population grows and it doesn't rain. So we really need to be incentivizing people to hook up so that we can prevent the leaks in the first place. That's really the main goal. But we really, there's no real reason that we should need to be giving adjustments. If people could find out that they have a leak and get it fixed very quickly, and like I said, 1.2 gallons was registering as a leak on mine, and it was sending me routine emails telling me that I had a leak. So I don't know if we need to send this to Utility Commission to look at and adjust the.
Well, this is one of the discussions that we had when we brought forward the electronic meters. And that is, you're hitting all the points of why we're pushing for that, and also, yes, we anticipate there'll be less adjustments. As far as getting the word out to everyone and that type of thing. I mean, I believe it's gone out in the water bills and things of that nature. I don't know what more we can do to get people to sign up for it. You're correct, it's a very great tool, but.
I have a question about it.
Sure.
So I tried to sign up, but I couldn't because I didn't know my account number. And then I don't know how to find my account number. So is there, and I'm paperless, so I don't look at bills.
You
or
can
anything.
come up here and Veronica can help you.
And that's cool, but I think if, like I put it in my council newsletter, I sent out all the links to the sign up stuff and the information. That's the second time I've sent it out. But it'd be really nice if I could also send them like a phone number or a link or an email address where they could get their account number if they need it, so that they don't just do what I do, which is hit a little roadblock and quit because you ran out of your 30 seconds you had to do this or whatever.
Sure.
So I don't know if y'all have something you suggest I put down. I'll put it in there and I'll send it out again next month.
Yeah, that'd be
Sure,
great.
absolutely.
Yeah, Veronica, can you get with him on
Oh,
that?
your
And we have a
emails.
good one pager that we put together.
I sent that out.
That would be, you did.
I did, but I don't know if it addresses the how to get your account number, but I don't know if most people get paper bills and have them laying around. I don't know. I don't do that.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I
Yeah,
don't know how
probably
people get their
2/3.
numbers.
Probably 2/3 still have paper, but yeah, they can always just call straight up to City Hall or email Veronica directly. But
I'll
we'll
put your email address in
Yeah.
next month when I send out the.
we'll make sure that's part of. We'll add that to all the how-tos. That'll be helpful.
I think it would.
I mean, I guess we could pass a policy that we're gonna be, or say we're gonna be stricter on,
Adjustments.
making adjustments, you know. I mean,
And we had taken that to the Utility Commission a few months back to talk about, we had thought at least, so currently we have a 6-month look back window and you can get an adjustment for up to 3 months.
right.
We had talked about at least severely dropping that to maybe a 2-month look back with a 1-month, ability to get that appeal. The leak adjustment. I can't say that they've really slowed down, other than now when we get them, we're telling people you need to sign up for this. Here's how you do it. We'll walk you through it. But we've still probably got about the same amount of leak adjustments that we usually get per month or so. So it hasn't seemed to slow it down yet, but the Utility Commission kind of wanted to wait until we had some more history behind us before making any changes. So they didn't take any action and they asked for it to be brought back in 6 months. So I think we're a couple months into that at this point. But I think staff would be supportive of that. I mean, the information is at your fingertips at this point. We check it periodically also and are able to tell if there is abnormal usage. So even we can alert people generally before meter reading. So, I mean, there's so many ways now to get that information.
And I would assume, Veronica, you're working with anyone who contacts you with a leak. You're taking that opportunity to encourage them to sign up on the, yeah. Okay, great.
Besides the water restriction stage 2, and for them to sign up, and I'll send them the link and the email for the Aya Water.
Great.
So, yeah, I'm trying.
I know you are.
But that's a good idea to send them the water account number, because you do need that.
Well, Ashley, and I was up here yesterday, Ashley and I checked, and the adjustment for the 198,000 gallon of water usage, the way that we are adjusting now, where you take the typical usage for that month and charge that normally, and then the excess gets billed at our wholesale rate plus 10%, the adjustment on that one would have been $3,300. Because that's how much that water would cost at the normal billing rate.
Out of a total bill of, it was like 4,700 or something, so dramatically reduced for sure.
Right.
So,
So clearly, that's not how much it costs the city, because we pay the wholesale rate regardless. But again, our water resources are limited. We don't need to be wasting the water, and we have a good method of detecting the leaks, and so we should be encouraging people to take advantage of that.
Veronica, if you would kind of keep it on your radar to give us a periodic update to see if we're getting more adoptions.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Ms. Wayman, Veronica? All right. With that, we'll move off of agenda item number 6 on to number 7. Update, discussion, and possible action on the MOPAC South expansion project. I will ask Ms. Wayman to give us a little update. We've got a lot of things in your packet this evening, as well as printouts at the back.
yes, so just a brief overview of what's in the packet. We have a short one sheet that kind of tries to capture, this project back to 2013 when it began with the Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority. And then basically what is the current, what's going on with this project. So this summer there was a series of technical working group meetings that CTRMA held. At that time they were showing alternative 2C, which is the alternative that is currently being proposed as the recommended build alternative. And it does not appear that between those meetings and now that alternative has changed. So they are recommending alternative 2C, that is the elevated ramps over Barton Skyway. I will say they are a little closer to Bee Cave Road is where the elevation actually starts. They do ultimately get to Barton Skyway, but there is a little bit of elevation that happens just at Bee Cave Road and going towards Barton Skyway. You'll also see the second attachment in the packet is our most recent letter that we sent at the end of those technical working group meetings. We had a chance to work with the MOPAC South Task Force and various council and community members to come up with what was important to us and what we would like them to look at. And I did try to summarize what's in that letter in that first one sheet. The third attachment is the email from MOPAC South talking about the open house that they just opened up. That started on November 12th, and it was an in-person meeting that day, and then it runs all the way through December 29th virtually. So that link is still live. People can still go there and give feedback, and we do ultimately foresee the city submitting some kind of official comment during this period. And then the last thing is the document that was provided at the open house for anybody who was there in person, kind of showing what the room setup was and what the opportunity for comment looks like. We have also printed the large schematic maps. They're here in the back. If you've missed them, they're kind of hard to miss, that they showed at the open house. And so you're able to kind of see in a big screen view sort of what is being proposed. It doesn't really look like anything on the schematic changed between the summer meetings to now at the open house, with the exception of the shared use path being added. There was some additional shared use path added on the west side of MOPAC, which is something that we advocated for in previous designs. There wasn't very much of that wider path. There was some sidewalks and stuff, but we had been advocating for more connected shared use paths there, and it does look like that they were able to accommodate that, but for the most part the alternative has stayed the same. I think the biggest Probably impact to us would be our toll access from the city of Rollingwood. So currently, obviously going north, we can get onto the toll lane where it begins, going north towards the domain. But under the current alternative that they're proposing, there would not be a toll entrance there anymore. That entrance would be closed. And to go north, you wouldn't be able to get on the toll until 2222 would be the next entrance to that toll lane from our location if you were coming off Bee Cave Road. Or you could go south all the way to William Cannon and turn around and get north, which is a bit of a ways out of the way. I'm sure that there might be some other weird.
You could go into downtown and take First Street and then come around to get on the.
One of those other kind of arterial. But anyways, that's one of the main things that we advocated for in that letter that doesn't appear that it was addressed.
And in the letter, we actually had a section dedicated to that point. It was also what was implied in all of the added language that we were suggesting when we talked about including those that originate from eastern or western arterial roads and ultimately utilize MOPAC. Our point being, you shouldn't just take into account the north-south traffic. There are plenty of us who are also trying to access those tollways that are originating or coming to or leaving the western portion of the area.
Well, that means nobody coming from 360 could get onto the northbound toll
Right.
road.
Until
Or
Yeah.
Bee Caves Road?
or Bee Cave Road,
Right.
Yeah.
all of that. Correct.
It's hard to tell if the U-turn is still included from underneath.
I don't believe any of that is changing at this point. And they are also adding a U-turn at Barton Skyway. So that is another, somewhat of a bonus that you still couldn't access the toll lane. You could turn right and U-turn onto Barton Skyway and get on pretty quickly that way. So that's a positive.
But that U-turn should not be confused with a version that we saw long ago, which would have forced everyone into a U-turn.
Right. That's
Or eliminated the ability to go north from
Right.
Bee Caves
Correct.
Road. That's
Yeah.
what.
That's a different thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one more small feature I'll point out of 2C that I think has been in 2C all along is that the exit ramp southbound from MOPAC to get onto Bee Cave Road was pushed back as far as they could to kind of help those people who are just exiting and need to turn onto Bee Cave Road and have to they have to come all the way across 3 lanes of traffic and turn in. I think they pushed it back a couple hundred feet, that exit. So it gives you a little more time to get your thoughts together before you're turning into Bee Cave Road. But that's been a part of that alternative as well.
Those are the highlights. Oh, I will say also we have been in communication with the Westlake Area Chamber of Commerce. They're interested in this. They actually sent someone to the open house, the in-person open house. I've sort of kept them. I've kept this on the radar at the chamber when I've attended meetings with them and given our community reports to them. So they're engaged. They're open to collaboration. And I think we'll be doing some of that themselves, but also happy to take our guidance on that. I had someone from the Tremont community reach out to me. This is on their HOA's radar, and they actually did submit some comments in the other comment period as well, and I think are looking at doing the same for this one and would like to coordinate as well. I think the city of Westlake has been in communication as well. You're going to meet with them at some point this week? On Friday. So, and then we do need to circle, and we will circle back with the task force as well, now that the open house is open officially. So that's the update. I guess our question would be, is there anything in particular council would like us to endeavor to do? Do we want to try to ask CTRMA to come present here as they've done in the past? We're open to thoughts and suggestions.
What's the deadline for comments? It's December,
December.
End of December.
Before
December
our
29th, which is after so we have one more
so
meeting.
One more meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know Amy Amy knows a lot about this and can help explain some of it to us, but, just think it'd be helpful to have a reminder of the context of the overall project timeframe. So I understand that after this phase, it's still maybe gotta go to the Regional Mobility Authority, or the, what do you call it, the Capital Area Authority. And it's gotta get approved by them, and I don't know, is this project funded yet? Or-
It is not funded yet.
Yeah, I didn't think so, and so it hasn't even, I mean, it isn't gonna go to like full design until it gets funded, I'm sure, right? Which will be a long process.
Amy may very well know those nuances in terms of the funding piece better than I do.
And I guess I'm trying to figure out is
I
how
think that
much
would-
of what's happening now
I think that
is-
would be part of the ask of CTRMA to spell out all of that.
Yeah, and, yeah, cause I think the real question is how much of what's happening now is like fully baked into whatever goes forward, or how much it's gonna change from here.
I think some of the important questions, and Amy and I have talked about it, we need a better understanding of their scoring matrix. We do need a better understanding of their timeline, of their funding. The fundamental answer to your question is yes, there's a long way between today and them pushing dirt. But I think it's important that we continue to stay engaged at every step, so.
Agreed.
Kind of like turning a aircraft carrier, right?
It is.
You know, it may take a long time to make it happen, but once it starts, it's really
That-
hard to
yes.
stop the process, so.
That's correct.
I think it'd be useful for us to have them come do a presentation to our citizenry.
I think if it's okay with you all, not hearing any objection, we'll reach out to them and see if they can attend our next month meeting and do that. And to their credit, they did come and meet with us prior to the work groups starting. So they have been open to that in the past, and I would hope that they would be again.
Should we have a special
Amy,
workshop?
you have any comments about anything?
I can think of some.
I'd love that.
And I will say also, when I was looking through these materials to prepare for the meeting, I saw your comments back to them, Mr. Mayor, but I didn't really get a sense from any of the materials, like here's a summary of the bullet points of things that we really care about or that really concern.
And part of the reason is the purpose of the technical working group was for them to fine tune their criteria, their what's the term I'm looking for? Their evaluation criteria.
Mhm.
And so we were trying to speak their language and
Right.
the phase that they were in for that piece of the puzzle.
Because my takeaway was, from looking through all the materials that got sent out or that are on the agenda, and I sent some of them out in my newsletter, was overhead express lanes are going to be bad for us, just to have overhead lanes because of the noise and visibility and everything. And I know there's other access issues like in the turnaround issues and such, but I think especially if we're going to try to get the public to engage and comment, it would be good to tell them what they ought to be mad about.
Yes. We understood. We understand that. In the technical working group process, they were focused on the project goals and the project goals and objectives and the evaluation criteria. So the sort of the bite at the apple that we had in that phase in the technical working group was to try to make comment specific to the project goals and objectives as well as the evaluation criteria. So we were focused on trying to make changes within those kind of subparts of the process. And I would argue, had limited success in that. So, Amy?
Oh, yeah, I guess, Amy Patillo with 3 Rockaway Cove. I can answer, I guess the question I heard was the timeline. What happens
Yes.
next? So just looking at the timeline that CTRMA has put out, and I don't have it in front of me, but in general, what they've said is this is the last open house before they'll go to what's called the final EA stage. And the EA stands for environmental assessment. So they'll prepare a document that's the full assessment of the environmental impact of the project. And the goal that you usually have if you're preparing an EA is to get to what's called a FONSI, which is a finding of no significant impact. So the EA's goal is to show whatever impacts that they may have identified, that they have a way to remediate those. So the challenge that we have right now is that this is kind of the last open house period to comment on impacts and to comment on them in a way to say there's not really a way to remediate or to find a way to address this type of impact. So the result would be there needs to be more design that happens. And in the past, like starting from 2015 on, the city of Rollingwood requested that CTRMA actually study this under what's called an EIS, which is an environmental impact statement, which is a higher level of assessment of impacts. In the last couple of years, Travis County has sent a letter to CTRMA requesting that this be moved to an EIS. And that's one thought is Rollingwood could look again at the previous request of this being studied as an EIS. And that requires, my understanding is that requires looking at more impacts and potentially would allow for additional discussion about the design. And that's really where, in looking at the city's position since 2015, there's been a very clear delineation that Rollingwood is in favor, at least in the past, of improvements to MOPAC, but not in favor of the design that was first the double-decker and then also the one that's been put out as the preferred alternative. So really we're kind of in that last, I think we're in the last open house before they're stating they're going to go to final EA. The CTRMA board would then receive the FONSI and vote to send it to the Texas Transportation Commission. The Texas Transportation Commission would then vote on whether to accept the EA or send it back and say, y'all need to go and do an EIS. So there's a couple, the reason I bring up those acronyms is I think we're going to start hearing those a little bit more from CTRMA during this phase. And the EA versus the EIS has been a question that the city of Rollingwood has asked in the past and that Travis County more recently from the Commissioner's Court has sent back to the RMA to talk about. As far as the funding part, I don't know that I have the answer to that question, but looking at the funding timeline, there would have to be a decision made by the Texas Transportation Commission to say, yes, this is a project that we want to find funding for. And either TxDOT is going to be the ones building it and finding the funding, or CTRMA would be the one saying, we're going to build it and we're going to find the funding. And that is definitely an open question right now as to what entity would be the one building it if the current alternative is accepted and they finish an EA and it's accepted. So those are just a couple of
So I guess
thoughts.
my question though is how much of the specifics of this design are fully baked at the end of this environmental assessment period? I mean, it's if this thing hadn't even gone to engineering or design work yet, I mean, is this like a rough outline of what it's supposed to look like and then they'll flesh it out in the engineering process is what I would think would happen. And my other issue is, I mean, this all sounds like kind of putting sticks into the bureaucratic spokes, which is fine.
Mhm.
But, it doesn't, none of it really addresses our specific concerns. And, I know we don't like elevated roadways in general, and I apologize, but I'm a little ADD and I'm going through all of the issues with it. It's like, I wasn't really clear on like what we're going to lose. Like, are we going to lose our cut through where Rollingwood Drive goes into Zilker? Or are we going to lose our turnaround at Barton Springs? Is it really just a matter of being able to access those express lanes once we get on to MOPAC? Is that really all it is?
I think that's one of the major concerns. Most
Okay.
of what most of those issues you mentioned will not be losing
Okay.
those sorts of things.
So it's
I-
access to those express lanes and also just the presence of big elevated express lanes that are noisy and
yeah,
ugly.
to some extent.
I would, if you're open to another issue, I would say that a concern I have looking at the 2C alternative is that there's a number of new bottlenecks that would be introduced into the general lanes based on where toll lane access or toll lane exit points would go into the general lanes, and then people trying to get across multiple lanes of traffic really quickly to go to an exit point.
Like
That-
183 they do now.
Right, yeah. So there's, like, I can see 4 new kind of bottleneck points that would be introduced between Barton Skyway and Enfield, just from the design of where the toll lane ingress and egress are. So it's not just a loss of access. I think it's also that we're getting a reduction of safety because of new bottlenecks being introduced. And in talking with one of the other entities that Rollingwood has really partnered with in the past is Austin High, because even though it's not here in Rollingwood, the security of that campus and the safety has been important, and it kind of goes with the reality of this area being an ecosystem, that because of the loss of access, most likely what Google will direct most people to do is to exit Caesar if they want to get on the toll lane going north, or coming off the toll lane south if they want to enter and exit to BK's, is to exit at Cesar Chavez and then do the turnaround that's right next to Austin High, where you go and do that like hairpin turnaround that you're supposed to slow down to 10 miles an hour, and it's really narrow and it's not safe. And so it would be introducing a lot of traffic that is intending to get on the toll lane and using that as a turnaround right there in front of Austin High. I don't think that's a great solution for our community either. And it definitely would increase the amount of traffic going on Cesar Chavez, which would then lead to people trying to find alternative routes to get into downtown. So,
Yeah. Well, I already have trouble with use the right lane to keep left at the fork, which is very confusing when it tells me that.
yeah.
So I'm exiting there. Well, thanks for all your work on all this.
Sure. The question you had about like how fully baked is it? I would say that from watching other projects, I can't. That's an area where I think that would be a great question to ask CTRMA. But from watching other projects move forward, once that environmental assessment or the EIS is finished, if there is funding, it moves pretty quickly to a design phase that looks very similar most of the time to what's the lines that are on the paper. Typically that engineering is just more about making sure that water lines are being relocated and identifying like how much right of way is actually needed. So I would, my assumption is that the lines that are on the map are about what we would get.
That's my assumption too.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ann.
One more question. It seems, if you've driven Bee Caves Road in the last couple of years between 4 o'clock and 6 p.m., it's backed up past 360. How is this going to work if people trying to get off of Bee Caves Road and onto the tollway can't get on because it's really no improvement for that traffic, it seems.
Agreed.
Is that clearly understood at whoever's doing the design on this?
I think that would be a great question to ask CTRMA. I mean, I know that.
Is there a traffic study that has measured that traffic in connection with this design? I guess is what I'm asking.
Not in connection with the east-west. That's sort of.
That's the point of
That's
the
the-
east-west comments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the point.
And
Like
and really, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, that the entire time that I'm aware of the city commenting, the request has been made over and over and over again to really look at like how the intersection of Bee Cave Road and Mopac are going to work. And my understanding is the last round of discussion that now TxDOT is going to take over separately studying the intersection. So we're not going to get much information about how the intersection is impacted unless TxDOT is also asked to come and provide that information, is what I would say.
If they're studying the intersection, how far does that go back on the stack up of traffic past 360 on B Caves Road? I mean,
That would be a great question.
Yeah.
I mean, and potentially you could ask TxDOT to also come and give a report on how they're planning on reconciling their study of that intersection with the MOPAC South project. Because technically TxDOT oversees CTRMA, but CTRMA right now is the one who is studying the MOPAC South project. But TxDOT has now carved out the intersection as something they're going to look at separately.
And we did a call, and we did a call with TxDOT, and I mean, what's basically going on there, and I can't totally fault CTRMA, but CTRMA has basically said just that, like, hey, TxDOT, you guys, y'all handle the intersection. And then we did a call, and basically TxDOT kind of looked at us and like, okay, what do you want us to do? And Ashley and I are like, we're not engineers, so you tell us. So there's going to be a lot of this between CTRMA and TxDOT kind of looking at us too for guidance on that intersection, but so
would it make sense for Rollingwood, along with City of Westlake and Westlake Chamber and all other interested parties, to jointly ask for a collective meeting with them?
yeah, and I think actually I said it was us, but I think Westlake was on that call. Westlake was on the call. We were on the
If
call.
we do that, it wouldn't take place at a Rollingwood City Council meeting.
Right.
Yeah, we'd need to get on that.
Yeah. And in fairness, they were open to a dialogue, but it was clear to us it was sort of a passing of the torch between CTRMA and TxDOT for the discussion. So
Well, but I can imagine there being some greater
yeah,
responsiveness if it is a lot of West Austin as compared to just
yes,
Rollingwood.
agreed.
But what do we think our goal would be? Is like to get away from these express lanes altogether, or just change the exit points, or,
Yeah,
I mean, what are we gonna try to accomplish?
yeah, I think we need to identify that too.
I definitely think access to the toll lanes, and that is something we did add it in the comments, but we also talked about it in the work group meetings before we made the comments. And we had a long discussion with the engineer about it, and I don't remember the rationale or reason, but she had a reason as to why it wouldn't work. But I'm not saying that that's the definitive answer, but
And this is to go in the new toll lanes going south, right?
south and
South
north.
is-
And
South and north.
Looks like
yeah.
south
Or
would be easier
north
to
is
get
the
on.
real problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, north is the
I
problem.
think south we could.
Well, it's
get on.
actually both, because you
Is it
can't
both?
you won't be able to, if you're coming south, you won't be able to get off of the toll lane, the place where you can get off of it right
Yeah,
now.
that's the problem.
And so, and you'd have to go back, you'd have to go down to William Cannon or exit Cesar Chavez and do the loop around. But could I say one thing on the Bee Cave question? There was a significant amount of work done during the time that Roxanne was mayor. That was one of the different times that the city has met with CTRMA in the past about trying to figure out what would happen with Bee Cave Road. So this has been an ongoing conversation. There have been a lot of people in a lot of meetings about it, but there was at one point in time a presentation that they did where they looked at 3 different design configurations, CTRMA did, of the Bee Cave intersection. And I know Ashley has
We have that.
presentation, so that might be a helpful resource to look back at it. Those were ones that at that point in time, the council reviewed them and didn't favor any of the.
That's where you're remembering the forcing everybody to that turnaround was one of those 3 options. that was
Right.
mentioned.
Yeah, like literally just removing the entire intersection was one of the options and just making it a pass through. Another one was a divergent diamond. And then the third one was, I'm not remembering off the top of my head.
Those are always the 2 I remember.
There was a third one though.
There was a third, and I can't remember what it was.
I can't recall.
We were
as
so
well.
shocked by the other 2.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The other question that
They tend to gravitate back to the divergent diamond. Spoiler alert.
Well, and
Yes.
I'm just thinking about this. If you can't come north if you can't come from the north on the toll road to get off at Bee Caves Road, or you have to go all the way to William Cannon, think of what the mess that will be for Trail of Lights. I mean, it's a huge mess, because you've got people coming from all over for that.
Except that that's once a year, and the rest of us live here and
I-
have
well, I'm
to,
just-
every day.
Oh, well, I know that, but if you've tried, I just know that would set off alarms across the across the city, and even, it's, if people coming from the north have to go to William Cannon to get back to Zilker Park on a heavy traffic event day, that's pretty
Agreed.
nuts.
Well, it's just seemed to me throughout this whole process that they are way more concerned with traffic coming from south to north, and they are paying no mind at all to people coming from the west in.
That
So
is absolutely,
360 or Bee Caves or any of that, it's just like,
that is absolutely correct.
you know what, so somebody is invested in property south that they want to, speed the access to downtown, and they're like, yeah, they're not worried about the people on the west side of,
Well, and if
Town.
if I can comment on one thing that Councilmember Glasheen was asking, what would we want instead, right? So one thing the city has commented on in the past is looking at actually optimizing the design that doesn't include what's called the wishbone, which is the elevated lanes that are coming around. Even simple things that are in the configurations that have the elevations were never actually put in the configuration that didn't have the elevations to give them even a chance of scoring the same. And I think that's problematic, that there wasn't a true look at whether there could be a solution that didn't include elevated lanes. The way that the wishbone elevated lanes intersect with with MOPAC also makes on both sides, we're gonna have, like, for people who are entering MOPAC from Bee Caves Road, they're gonna be having to enter next to high-speed traffic coming off of the toll lane. Those two lanes are gonna be right next to each other. And then if you're exiting Bee Cave Road, even though it's been pulled back, the exit ramp is for the toll lane and for Bee Caves Road together. And so we're gonna have these points now where you're gonna have new types of traffic and new speeds of traffic that are intersecting with those two intersection points. Those two things alone are not necessary if you don't have elevated lanes. And that's two of, I would say, 8 safety issues that would be introduced by this proposal. The other thing I would say is that there are a lot of places along MOPAC where people are wanting safety improvements, but the way that this has been studied, the goal has been to reliably get people from Slaughter to Cesar Chavez. That's been the goal of the study, instead of to actually address safety and congestion points along the roadway. So one of the things that has been effective is the new ramp lanes that were put in at Barton Skyway to address the short entrance ramp length. By lengthening those and kind of adjusting how the lanes are fixed there, it's increased speeds, and it's reduced that congestion point. And the money was actually allocated originally for study of this roadway because of that specific congestion point. It was a $10 million solution to fix it. It didn't take very much study. So another question has been, are there points along the way that could actually just be looked at as separate standalone projects, where actually just fixing ramp lengths would adjust the issues that are happening, without introducing new issues and without having to spend $1 billion or whatever it's going to be. So
Amy, you've done a good job explaining to me in the past the difference in travel time from the very first version that we saw to today. And I think it went down, from 45 minutes? Was it 45?
yeah, I'd have to go back and look at the numbers off. I'm not remembering them all off the top of my head, but in general, the projections that first came out were much of the amount of time we were all going to be sitting in traffic were much longer than they are after the data was updated for the 2045 Campo plan, which is just to say that after 15 years of actually seeing how traffic is going to happen in the area after the pandemic, after kind of just seeing how traffic is moving in the area, the projections are that the congestion isn't going to be as bad in the future as it was projected 15 years ago that it would be. So it just makes it, I think the challenge is if you don't have enough congestion, there may not be as much of an appetite for bond funding.
And
That's not my expertise. I'm just kind of
so
saying
I do
what I've
think
understood.
one of the discussion points with CTRMA is to try to drill down on that question a little bit of, okay, what is the actual improvement at the end of the line? What is that improvement? And is that if you're just improving travel times by 6 or 9, 10 minutes at the very end of the project, now compare that to the travel time that you may be increasing on east-west traffic that is originating here. I mean, you may be increasing our travel times by 20 minutes to try to get out and up and wherever, all to save 6 minutes for someone going to Slaughter.
And the same thing on even getting onto Loop 360 if you're
Right.
west of Loop 360, because the traffic's going to be backed up to get across that intersection and go one way or the other.
Right. Thank you for letting me comment. I'll say if I have any other
It
questions.
was well needed.
Yeah.
I
Thank
was
you.
quickly getting over my head, so thank you. Okay, so if that works for you, council, we will ask CTRMA to come next week to try to drill into some of these questions in greater detail.
Be great.
What
One
did I
thing
say?
that I,
Come next week.
Next month. Sorry.
yeah,
You can come next week, but I won't be here.
Do we want to also consider whether any of the other jurisdictions around us would want to join in on getting TxDOT or CTMRA to address impacts to Bee Caves Road?
Yes, we will do that as well. We'll actually invite TxDOT next week as well, next month as well. And we'll reach out to both the chamber, Westlake Hills, yes, and Tremont.
Does
When-
Tremont have a HOA?
Yes.
I think that would be good too.
one thing that would help me too, when they want to put on a dog and pony show for us, this sort of abstraction, 2D abstraction is not super helpful to me to figure out how these these elevated lanes would work. If they have any other kind of imagery, that would sure be helpful.
We can ask for,
Design.
yes.
Yeah, it is by design.
Intentionally obscure.
We can ask for that, and also, I think we pointed out too, not that the 2D, it's still 2D, but it's very large 2D. If you wanna spend some time in the back, on the printed out versions.
And there's a video on that open house website that is pretty good. The only thing is it doesn't follow the route we would take. It just follows, going north or
Okay.
south. So it's a little hard to tell, but it's a little better on it, kind of showing how the different lanes kind of veer and intersect.
Animation.
So, yeah,
Okay, so you have your to-do.
got my to do.
Okay, great. Moving off of agenda item number 7, on to the consent agenda, I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval of the consent agenda?
Is that okay?
No, I had a correction that I meant to call about, and I didn't.
We'll go one at a time, there's only 2 of them. Your motion is not recognized this time, and we'll move
Shot
on to
down.
agenda item.
So early.
Yeah, I know, right? We'll move on to agenda item number 8, discussion and possible action on the minutes from the October 16th, 2024 City Council meeting. Recognize Ms. Hudson.
Yes, and that was on agenda item number 14. It says, Mayor Pro Tem Sarah Hudson discussed the building height survey results and explained why connecting driveways are a safety issue. Pretty sure that was not the building height survey. It was the CRCRC survey. So,
We'll clarify that.
We will make that change. And now I'll take a motion with the recommended change.
move approval.
Move approval with the recommended change. You have a motion by Ms. Hudson. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Hudson, a second by Ms. Brown. Further discussion, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Agenda item number 9, discussion and possible action on an ordinance amending the city's code of ordinances to require tree protection during construction. This is the agenda item that you had last month, now in ordinance form. I'll take a motion.
Move approval of ordinance number 2024-11-20-09.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Brown, a second by Ms. Hudson. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Thank you, council. Moving on to agenda item number 10. Discussion and possible action to allow the construction of a playhouse playscape at 2602 Pickwick Lane. I'll recognize Ms. Wayman to explain why this, I think, very simple thing is before you tonight.
Yes, so at the October 16th City Council meeting, staff was directed to abate enforcement with respect to a specific playhouse that had been being discussed at that meeting, and that for any additional playhouses to be being built during this 6-month time frame, where the abatement period was really to take a pause, send it to P&Z, get their discussion and possible recommendation on any changes to our rules that would or would not require playhouses, kind of leaving that open, but to bring any new playhouses that are requested during that time to council. And so what you'll see here in the packet is a proposed picture of the playhouse we were approached about, as well as a proposed location. I believe we have a representative of the property owner here as well, to answer any questions, but we just didn't really know what to do with someone
Yeah.
who came in to ask about
Yeah.
this at
And
this point.
our hands were simply tied because of previous instructions of the council. This would typically not come back before you, but we had committed to you that we would, so it's before you this evening, and I would be happy to accept a motion to abate. Would it be a motion to abate?
I guess,
It'd basically be the
Allow the
same motion that you
construction.
did last month for the other one, for this one. And as you can see, it's much,
Can it just be like motion to allow construction of a playhouse at this location?
yes,
Okay, that's my
May
motion.
I ask about
That's
that?
my motion.
you may. I'm gonna accept the motion and then.
Second.
You have a motion by Mr. Robinson, a second by Mr. Glasheen, and now a discussion by Ms. Brown.
This, here's my issue. I think what we're trying to get to is what we've asked, what we did at last council meeting. And part of what we did was to ask P&Z to take this issue up and make a recommendation to the council. We currently have on the books an ordinance that requires a permit for a playhouse. I don't know how detailed that process is, but I'm uncomfortable with the council taking action rather than going through the steps to amend the code. Taking action that is inconsistent with the code as currently drafted. And so I would prefer, and I don't know that we can legally do that. The effect of the motion would be to ignore the code rather than amend the code, and I don't know that we can do that. So I'd like information from our council whether we can legally do the action that's in the motion, and then secondly, if we can't, then I think the alternative option would be simply to abate enforcement of this playhouse along with the first playhouse pending action on amending the ordinance.
Question.
Yes, sir.
One of the premises of Councilmember Brown's statement was that our current code requires people to get a permit for a playhouse, and I'm not sure if that's correct or not. Just want to ask our administration if that's their view of our current code.
I think it was determined that a playhouse would fall into the category of an accessory building or structure. I don't think we've spent, the full time to determine what it actually is as it stands right now, because there was appetite to, review it and find out what we really wanted it to say and make sure the, definitions in the code was, got to that point. But, at this time, I believe it would have to go through the permitting process, be treated as an accessory building, and then, those rules would apply to it.
Why can't we just pass a resolution directing staff to interpret the definition of accessory structure to not include a playhouse?
May I respond?
Yes, ma'am.
Because the ordinance specifically says the word playhouse, that an accessory building includes a playhouse.
Yeah, and let me back
Okay.
up too.
I didn't know that.
Yes,
Okay, that helps.
Yeah.
My understanding.
It has those words in it.
And
Okay.
so let's back up too. So the issue that came up last month has gone or is going to
P&Z.
P&Z.
We
So
have a subcommittee
that
with
is
it.
happening. That was the action that you took last month. But the parting instruction was, at the time that you abated that playhouse last month, the parting instruction was, if anything else comes in front of you, just bring it back to us and we'll handle
And-
it. So
And I think it's that's what the staff's done here, so I think that's why it's before us. And we can say we can abate enforcement, but I think we only abate it pending whatever change in the ordinance ultimately is adopted.
Well, there's also prosecutorial discretion.
One other thing,
Yeah.
if I may. The part of the permitting is also deciding how many part of the accessory building ordinance addresses how many accessory buildings you can have on a lot, and also whether they can be within the required yards or not. And so I think that's part of the answer we're gonna get back. And when we ultimately decide what we're gonna do about playhouses and permitting. But it may be, I don't know how difficult it is. And one thing we talked about last time was, a playhouse couldn't have utilities connected to it, and still be a playhouse. Things like that would help clearly define what is a playhouse for purposes of accessory building ordinance and what's not. So my recommendation, that's why I would say I would vote no on the pending motion, and my recommendation would be is we treat this playhouse like the last playhouse, abate enforcement pending action by the P&Z on the ordinance.
And let me get clarity on the motion that's on the table. So was that the intent? I thought the intent of your motion was to basically treat this exactly like you treated the playhouse last month. Is that?
My thought is, I'm looking at these pictures and I'm like, I don't understand why it looks like a playscape kind of thing. I
Right.
had one. I never went through any process for
Yeah.
this. And I'm like, let the people build the playscape. That's where my emotion's coming from.
Right.
That's where
And,
But I'm thinking that's not too far removed from what Ms.
I don't disagree on the merits, except our ordinance would prohibit a playhouse.
Well, my question is what they're proposing a playhouse? Because to me, it looks like a playscape.
Or a swing set.
Yeah.
Right, and the difference between what's being proposed here and the previous one is that it does not have four walls.
Looks
No
like it
part
has
of it
4
is
walls.
totally enclosed.
Yes.
Which changes the view for the neighbors, and,
So, let me interject just briefly. This is a zoning question. Our administrator made a decision that this is a playhouse. Under the rules and the law, technically, the person who is requesting to put this should appeal that decision to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. However, because of what's going on with playhouses right now, staff brought it back to you to see, do you want to abate enforcement of this one like you did the other one? If you do that, I think that will solve the issue with respect to this one, and until we get back what P and Z wants to do.
And my
Which
motion.
would mean they can build it.
Yes.
And my motion last time was that we abate enforcement of playhouses until P and Z deals with this, because I do want to apologize to our resident who's here for even having to be here, because it defies common sense that we would be hassling people over playscapes like this, and so we're sorry. But it's just a technical issue that we're trying to fix, and it just has a process to get it fixed, which means we have to get our code amended, which means it has to go to planning and zoning. We're trying to not bother you during the process. But I would just say, I would re-urge my motion that we abate enforcement on any playhouses until P and Z deals with this, so that anyone else that gets a playscape doesn't have to come to a city council meeting in the next 6 months to get a playhouse approved, unless it's something that you determine to be something egregious as our administrator, that you think is not really a playhouse. If somebody's trying to build an office or a granny flat in their backyard and call it a playhouse, let us know. But if it's a normal playhouse, I'd like to just abate enforcement actions so we don't make homeowners come to us at every council meeting with a request to put up a swing set.
Well, define normal playhouse, that's the problem.
Well, it's a matter of common sense.
But
And I trust
It's-
our
but it's
administration to
not.
have common sense to make that determination.
it's not common sense, and that's the whole reason we're in the situation that we're in now.
And we have a nervous, well, I don't know the way, I think that based on what has occurred with the previous one, staff has taken a conservative approach in their interpretation, which I absolutely do not blame them for doing. However, we are where we are, and I agree with Councilmember Brown that it is nuanced, but there is a difference between a motion to authorize them to construct
Yeah.
and a motion to abate enforcement. And so if we want to just friendly amendment, remove the previous motion and have a motion to abate enforcement and a second, the gentleman will be able to build his playhouse.
Let's do,
No, it's not call it a playhouse.
Let's not taking it down.
here's,
Yeah.
Well, then you can vote on it.
Hold
and
on.
then go to
It dies, it dies.
okay, well, that negates,
We're gonna kill.
that negates my compromise. That negates my compromise position that I was gonna
the
give
law and
you.
order people.
And I didn't mean to step into your shoes, Mayor.
That's okay. I need you in my shoes tonight. Okay, you have a motion. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to call the vote. You're going to vote on it, and then I'm going to recognize. We'll see what happens with that, but the floor will still be open for a second motion. So you have a motion. Not
Can
taking
you
further.
read the motion again, please?
To approve the playhouse.
Yes.
Just to.
Just allow
Approve it.
construction of
Never
it.
come back to him again, asking him if there's any enforcement issues because things not 5 feet from the sideline.
Okay, you just restate your motion.
No, just a motion to allow construction of playhouse at 2602 Pickwick Lane.
That's the motion. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll call the vote. Ms. Brown,
No,
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Glasheen,
Abstain.
Mr. McDuffie,
No.
Ms. Hudson.
No.
You have 3 noes, 1 aye, 1 abstention. Motion fails. I will reopen the floor for motions.
Okay. Do we have to have a motion, or can we discuss some more before we have a motion?
I'd like the motion so that you can then discuss but you go ahead and, if you have a question before your
Well,
motion.
I mean, I think that there's some clarifications before we even make a motion. First of all, because I took some really ugly comments on social media about being a anti-child hater and not liking playscapes from what happened last time. Very unpleasant. The issue was not with the playhouse. It was that particular playhouse that we were dealing with last time, 2-story, 5 feet from the property line and staring in the neighbor's bathroom. So, there are issues that we can't just say, you can put up whatever you want to and call it a playhouse, because everybody's definition of what is reasonable and normal and just a playhouse is not the same. And so I don't like the idea of saying, you can put in whatever kind of playhouse you want to now, and we're not gonna make any restrictions. To me, what's being proposed here is not a playhouse, it's a playscape. It does not have a enclosed second story, like the previous one. There is an elevation difference on this property between their property and the neighbor next door, and a high fence, so I don't think it would be a concern. So I don't wanna say we are abating a playhouse, because I don't think that's what they're proposing to put in. To
But
me,
that's what your administrator has said it is, and that's the person who gets to make that decision under your code.
Why can't we
And if they
overrule it?
disagree with that, they can appeal it to the zoning board of adjustment. But tonight, assuming her decision is the correct decision, all you'll have to do is make an abatement, motion to abate the enforcement for this playhouse as it's been defined by your staff, and they can build the playhouse.
How about if we have a motion to adopt a statement that this is not a playhouse?
It has no effect under the law, because under the law, you don't get to make that decision. The administrator gets to make that decision, and if the applicant, if you don't like it,
Yes.
you know what you can do, as the body, you can
appeal.
say, we are appealing our administrator's decision to the zoning board of adjustment.
What if the administrator changes her mind?
And we're begging you to do that hastily.
Okay. Motion to abate enforcement of the building code requirements for this playhouse.
At 2602 Pickwick Lane.
2602
You have a motion by
Pickwick
Mr.
Lane. That's the
Glasheen. Is there a second?
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Glasheen, a second by Mr. McDuffie. Yes, ma'am.
we need to put a distance limit from the fence line. I think that's part of the problem that we had on the previous one, is that it was 5 feet from the fence line, and our accessory building rules, which is where this is maybe not covered, you have to build it respecting the setbacks. And so I think that I have no problem with them putting in a playscape. I just think that it should be put far enough away from the fence. And I don't know if that's a 10-foot setback side or the 15-foot setback side. It's the side setback that would be, and even if we just say 10 feet from the setback.
I decline the offered amendment.
I have a discussion on this.
Yes, ma'am.
It seems to me that those are the kinds of decisions we would like to get a recommendation from planning and zoning on, because that's zoning. All we're doing in this motion would be saying, we're not going to enforce the permit requirement for this playhouse where it is. And then once we, and my understanding of abatement is, if, let's say P&Z comes back and says, we agree with Ms. Hudson, and we take it up and we say, we agree that accessory buildings shouldn't be within 5 feet, and playhouses shouldn't be within 5 feet of the setback line, then whatever this applicant would have to do would have to come into conformance with that. So I think those kinds of questions will be answered in the zoning part of it, and not in just the enforcement, this particular limited enforcement action.
If we authorize this now, or say we're not going to enforce our rules,
Pending action by the P&Z, it's not a forever enforcement.
so they build it and then they have to move it?
Yes, that's the consequence, yes. And that's what we did in the motion last month, was abated it pending, reconsideration of the ordinance by planning and zoning and the council. So that would be the consequence. Otherwise, I think Charlie is absolutely right. We can't do anything and it has to go to P and Z.
Well, then I would say don't build it right up next to the fence.
Is that
If we allow it, keep it back a little bit.
to try to forego a future train wreck? That is not, Counselor. Is that how an abatement of a
Abatement means it's a temporary forgiveness.
Of course, it sounds.
It's
Right,
not a
but-
permanent forgiveness, it's a temporary forgiveness. If you made it a permanent forgiveness, then we're doing the thing we can't do, which is approve a structure to be built contrary to our zoning code.
well?
So
and I
that's
guess what
why
I-
it's temporary approval.
It's temporary approval for. I mean, I guess that's a legal question we should look into. But my understanding of when you abated that last month, that issue was settled for that particular playhouse.
No.
I hear you saying no, but we're going to look into the legal question
Well,
of it.
Well, I mean, I agree with Ms. Brown. Abatement just means that you wait. It's another word for wait.
Here's the
But-
motion that was passed last month. It's in our minutes that we approved. It's, that we abate enforcement with respect to the playhouse at issue for a period of 6 months pending review of the policy by the council on treatment of playhouses as accessory buildings. And then, for the purpose of this abatement, we define a playhouse as a structure built for the play of children, not having any associated utility services.
I understand your interpretation.
That's the words of the motion.
Right, and I understand your
Yeah.
interpretation of those words. My interpretation was different until this moment, so we will look into that legal question. Okay, counsel, what do you want to do? You have a motion, you have a second.
That was my motion.
Yeah.
I like
No,
Alex's motion's
I
better
thought
than
it-
mine now.
I thought your second motion, sorry.
Yeah, my motion, Alec made a
I did,
motion.
but my motion, if, like, I guess you can't vote on the same motion again.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, it's different, you can't, but the way
can
we're
make
making
it,
motions tonight, it's pretty easy to change it, so.
May I ask a
Let's just pass it.
Yes, ma'am.
question? What's involved in the permit process for a playhouse?
There is one, not one currently.
It
Or
would
go
just-
ahead.
It would just be treated like an accessory building or structure, I guess, depending on which one it's determined to be. It would go through, drainage. You can only have one accessory building on a lot. They can't be in those setback areas, is my understanding of it at this point.
It can't be two-story.
Right, it can't be two-story if it's an accessory building.
And that's
And it
the-
can't,
And
there
this
can't be
is
more than
clearly,
one
I mean,
accessory building.
Not structures that doesn't have that
this
limit,
is a
but
kit that somebody buys from wherever, right? This is not an accessory building. This is not any of that. I don't think there should be any of these requirements that it be away from the setback. I mean, this is no different from my next door neighbor having a basketball goal that is in the setback and playing basketball. It's like temporarily there are going to be kids there. They're going to make a little bit of joyous noise, and this is something that enlivens a neighborhood, and you should just get over it. And so I just don't believe that we should even be nitpicking about this. That frankly we ought to let people do this kind of thing. I understand it's different from the other building that is clearly a building, but when somebody's just putting up a kit, I had one in my yard. I would never have even considered coming and asking anybody's permission or approval for said thing any place that I wanted to put it in my yard. And so, I just think we're getting in the weeds on this. Let's let this guy, before his kids go off to college, put up a playscape and have a little bit of joy in his house.
This comes from a man who has a playhouse for chickens in his yard.
Shut up.
All right, is there further discussion? All right, all those, we will call the roll. Ms.
And
Brown?
can we have the motion
Repeat
again?
the motion, please.
Yeah, what is the motion currently?
Is to abate enforcement on the playhouse at 2602 Pickwick Lane. Is that correct, Mr. Glasheen?
That's correct.
That's your motion.
Is there a time limit?
Until further notice.
Is until further
Those
notice.
kids go off to college.
All those, oh, so,
Until further notice, is that it?
yes.
I like to tell kids go off to college.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I like to tell kids go off to college better. That's better.
Well, I think we can't do that if there's a change in the ordinance that would still. Anyway.
I guess they could put a grandfather clause in the ordinance.
Yeah.
There you go.
Or change in ownership of the house?
Right. Okay, all those in favor, Ms. Brown, yay or nay?
I would say yay, because I'm saying until further notice would be when we come back with either a change or no change to the zoning code.
And we will look into that question. Mr. Robinson?
I'm a yes. But
Yes,
I want
yes.
further
Well,
notice to be fair.
Mr. Mayor, I need to know what the motion is.
I will come back to you. The motion is to abate the enforcement of the Playscape Playhouse at 2602 Pickwick Lane.
With no time limit on it.
Until further notice.
Correct, until further notice.
Okay. Then I can vote yes on that.
Mr. Robinson?
I'm a yes.
Mr. Glasheen?
Yes.
Mr. McDuffie?
Yes.
Ms. Hudson?
Yes.
Being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Congratulations, Mr. Stewart. I'm sorry you had to be a part of that.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. I understand.
I agree with the merits of the discussion. I just don't think we can legally ignore the statute or ignore our code.
Thank you.
Moving on gratefully to agenda item number 11, discussion and possible action to issue an RFP for the construction of a retaining wall and drainage infrastructure in the upper park near the field house. Recognize Ms. Wayman.
So we have finally, after a few months of going back and forth between our engineers and the engineer that designed the retaining wall and drainage feature in the upper park near the field house, have come up with this design. Originally we had talked about a $30,000-ish estimate. The purchasing laws require us to get 3 bids from historically underutilized businesses, or to at least contact 3 of those businesses for anything above $3,000 and under $50,000. We did that. We only received 1 bid back in that process, and one of that single bid that we did get was over $60,000 for the construction of the retaining wall and the associated drainage structure, grading, pipes under the trail, all of that. And so our request today is to simply allow us to go out for RFP. It should be a very simple RFP because we have the design here attached, to try to just make sure we're covering all of our bases. Whether something comes in, the next bids come in, below the 50 or over the 50. If it hits that 50,000 mark, we're supposed to go out for RFP. And so that is just the request today would be to authorize us to go out for RFP for the construction of this retaining wall and drainage structure.
One thing you might do also is consider just getting Izzy and his crew to do the backfill and grading and any grass installation to separate it from the bid.
That's a great point.
And that'll save you some money. And then one of the guys I would reach out to is Michael Williams, who's John Itel lives here in the neighborhood. It's John's father-in-law. And Michael's been a mason, done a lot of work in Rollingwood for 40 years. And he had given us a bid for $30,000. Now that involved quarry block instead of CMU faced with limestone. And then another question a resident brought to me was, what kind of limestone you're gonna face it with, because you got three different kinds of limestone out there. You have the existing wall, you have the field house, which is a different kind of limestone, and then you've got some other wall that's kind of stack block limestone look instead of the what I would call field stone, which is the more rough shaped stuff. This stuff's cut into rectangles. So you got three different things out there, and so I think you can go ahead and get a bid with that, because and I think CMU faced with limestone's fine. Instead of quarry block, it's more consistent with what's there, and that's what's been designed, but they're both, that's functionally the same thing as far as, building.
I'm sorry, Mr. Glassman.
I'm sorry, I was just saying that.
When you turned your face toward that
Yeah,
way, it
no
doesn't pick
problem.
up.
I'm just saying that the, original bid and suggestion was quarry block, but this concrete block faced with a limestone facade matches one of the three things that's there. And I think we could go ahead and get a bid on that basis without necessarily having to select or specify what type of limestone would be put on the facade, whether it's cut block, thin cut block, or whether it's going to be, shaped fieldstone. I think that's a design detail that maybe the park commission could weigh in on at the end, but I don't think the bids would be any different, is what I'm trying to say. So I think you can go ahead and bid it and then change the detail without it being a change order, especially if you mention it up front, that we want limestone facade, but we're not sure whether we want cut or fieldstone or,
I think we would, assuming there's a motion to move forward with an RFP, we would probably get back with you and talk through some of those finer details with you on the RFP.
Okay. Anyway, that was kind of all of it. But feel free to call anytime, or, talk to Michael Williams. He can help you. Might even tell you how to save money or something.
Sounds good.
Make a motion for the approve the request to send this out for RFP.
You have a motion to move forward with an RFP by Mr. Glasheen. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion by Mr. Glasheen, second by Mr. McDuffie. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Thank you, council. Moving on to 12. Discussion and possible action regarding the water meter upgrade policy approved in November 2021. This is a pretty straightforward item. Have Ms. Wayman explain it.
Yes, we took this item to the Utility Commission in light of the fact that we have now completed our electronic meter project. This policy that was approved back in 2021 really dealt with how we were going to roll out electronic meters, and it sort of assumed we were going to do them on a case-by-case, meter-by-meter basis. It outlined who had to pay for the meters, and I think it talked about everybody pays for their standard, or the city would pay for the standard 5/8 meter, which is what generally a residential meter is, and then anything above that, the cost would be borne by the homeowner or the builder. At this point, all of the meters are brand new. They're all in. The only kinds of costs we can really foresee with meters in the future is upgrades, or new construction that requests new meters. Those costs are already paid for by a connection fee, so we have a fee in our code for those items, and they actually pretty closely do cover the cost of these new electronic meters. The previous meters were a lot less expensive, but our costs were the same, and so we're still looking at possible changes to our fee schedule to make sure that when those connections happen and larger meters are requested, that we're covering all of our costs there. So that will likely have to maybe be increased a little bit in the future. But we see that as being part of a water rate study, which we would like to do in probably the next 6 months or so, once we've had some more time for our with our electronic meters. But basically, the recommendation that they made was just to repeal this old policy. We had talked about whether we might go ahead and try to amend it for what we have in the ground now, but it doesn't really serve a purpose at this point, and I think it is cleaner just to repeal that policy, and then we will go back and analyze, now that we have these new meters, what could our possible costs be and who should be paying for those costs, and create a new policy at that time. So currently the recommendation and the action requested is to repeal the water meter upgrade policy approved in November 2021.
Great explanation.
So if there is a home that has a new water meter that is then torn down and a new house is built that wants a bigger service line,
Mhm.
and we don't have a policy in place, who pays for the bigger meter?
They pay a connection fee currently for a larger meter. So any meter upgrade or in that situation is when this meter connection fee would be charged. And it currently does covers us up to the 1-inch meter. It's kind of right at, if you include the cost of the meter and the cost of the endpoint. So I think at some point we would like to increase that to make sure it covers, shipping and staff time and installation. But at this point, it does actually cover that through that connection fee. And so those are being paid. They're not paying for the meter. That's not what we're saying. But we're saying we're charging you, $600. I can't remember what it is to connect to our system with your larger meter. And so they are ultimately paying as much as the meter costs at this time, if there's an upgrade.
So what's the difference between a new home that doesn't get a bigger meter and
There's a connection fee for any meter size. So the thing is, if they're not changing meter sizes, there is no new connection fee because the meter's always been there. It's been set. It's rare, but if there's a lot that doesn't have a meter yet, they will, even if it's a 5/8, they pay a connection fee. But it's smaller for that 5/8 meter. But if there's a 5/8 meter that exists and they just simply connect on, but have the same meter, there is no connection fee charged.
so the connection fee is only charged when it's new service or when they replace the meter?
Upgrade
Or
the meter.
upgrade.
Mhm.
Okay.
And I think maybe some language could probably be clarified as to what that fee is for. It's what's in our code and it's what we've always charged in those situations. So we could probably clarify that a little bit when we analyze those fees.
I just want to make sure if we eliminate this policy that we are still getting adequately reimbursed for somebody wanting to put in a bigger service line.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Good question. Happy to take a motion to accept.
So I move that we move forward with the repeal of the water meter upgrade policy.
You have a motion by Mr. McDuffie. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Mr. McDuffie, a second by Mr. Robinson. Further discussion, council? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Thank you, council. Moving on to agenda item number 13, discussion and possible action regarding a reduction in the number of comprehensive residential code review committee members. This is Miss Brown's agenda item. Recognize Miss Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Currently, there is the resolution that created the CRCRC designates that committee to have membership of 7 persons. 2 people have resigned. Their resignation does not, at this point, reduce the quorum requirements. So the quorum requirement for a 7-person commission is 4 people. The CRCRC doesn't have many tasks to complete, but we would expect it to stay in business through approval of a residential zoning code, or at least through any public hearing on approval of a residential zoning code, and for any other remaining tasks it may have. So it doesn't have a long life, but it has some life, and pending completion of its work, I'm recommending or asking the council to consider a resolution that would reduce the formal number of members of the commission from 7 to 5 so that they can establish a quorum with 3 members during this period of time. So that is the resolution. We've been advised through city staff that our city attorney says that's what would need to be done to reduce the quorum requirements, and so that is why this has been brought to you.
Happy to take a motion on that if you'd like to make one.
I would move that the council reduce the number of members of the CRCRC from the current 7-member commission to a 5-member commission.
You have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown, a second by Ms. Hudson. Further discussion?
Did we ever consider just appointing 2 other people?
There has been discussion with that, and I've discussed that with the chair of that commission. It would be difficult to bring 2 new members into a commission that's had quite a bit of their tasks completed. There's not a long period of time remaining or significant projects remaining for the CRCRC to complete. And so that is why they are not looking at adding new members, but at completing the tasks that are on the table right now.
I guess my opinion is like we keep it where it is, and they can figure out how to get a quorum. They got enough people to do a quorum. They can do it, right? Didn't you say that?
They have one, it would require all 4 of the 5 members to be present.
Yep. So I'm in favor of that. Just keep it the way it is.
Further discussion, council? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no.
No.
Being 4 ayes, 1 nay, motion carries. Thank you, council. Moving on to agenda item number 14, discussion and possible action regarding the CRCRC and scope of remaining projects. This is Mr. Glasheen's agenda item. Recognize Mr. Glasheen.
And I think some of that got answered for me. I just kind of wanted to get a idea of where we're at on all their various recommendations, like relative to sending them to P&Z. And Ashley and I had a little discussion about that, and she gave me a little bit of an update that satisfied me, but I think everyone would like to hear it. If you could give us that little summary, or maybe we could, if you need any help from Dave Bench, he's here.
That sounds like an easy way out, Ms.
I
Brennan.
know there are just a couple items that have been sent to P&Z, and I believe that's it. Is that correct, Dave? Are there any other items that the CRCRC is actively?
2 items from the last CRC
Okay.
meeting.
Would you mind stepping up? Sorry, Dave. Sorry, I don't remember my update.
It was so good, apparently. But.
I know it was great. I
It was
thought,
good.
but-
It satisfied me, but I don't remember it either. So.
Okay.
Dave Bench, 1 Randolph Place. At the last CRCRC meeting, we motioned and approved 2 final recommendations, and those are teed up to go to P&Z for the next P&Z meeting. We're not aware of anything else that we need to do. We also are going to be asking P&Z at the next P&Z meeting if there's anything on the plate that we missed or that P&Z would like to add to the CRCRC load before we close up. And my expectation is there won't be anything, but it could happen. But right now we're finalizing our recommendations.
And so, as far as the recommendations you've made is where they're at, we've got the lighting ordinance.
So those 4 are on their way. The 4 that we're going to actually discuss here in item 17 are already on their way to public hearing, and these there's 2 remaining that are going to P&Z.
Yeah.
Those would go to P&Z as just a recommendation. Then they would come to council, and then council would decide
Yeah.
whether to send those through that public hearing process as
And,
well.
and the building height recommendation is still being considered
And
by P&Z.
That's
And-
right. That
and
one's
there's-
kind of in the
and-
middle.
Yeah, and there's another option that's being looked at.
Which includes the whole tenting concept.
It has the tented concept. There are 2 proposals being considered, the CRCRC proposal and another that was brought forward by one of the P&Z members.
Right.
Both
Okay.
of them would include tenting.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, that's what I was wondering. And then, of course, as you said, it's coming up on the agenda here in a little bit. So
Right. We'll cover that
thank
soon.
you.
Perfect. Thank you,
Thanks,
Dave. Thank you, council. Any other, anything else on agenda item number 14? Hearing none, moving on to agenda item number 15, discussion and possible action on a resolution to authorize the hiring of an architect or building consultant as jointly recommended by the P&Z and CRCRC to review the application of 2 proposed building height models to a set of building plans as jointly recommended by the P and Z and CRC, and to advise the city of the impact of the models on the designated building plans. This is Ms. Brown's agenda item. Recognize Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's been some discussion on this item in the last week or so with Mr. Bench for purposes of P and Z and with certain members of P and Z. There had been a proposal brought to the council from the CRCRC in previous months, whether or not to proposals to conduct a workshop with respect to the building height proposal, and to, in that workshop, receive a report from an outside consultant on how the proposed building height ordinance might impact any chosen building permits. In other words, a kind of a third-party review of the impact of the building height, the changes in building height proposal, and confirmation of the anticipated impact as designed by CRCRC. At the last P&Z meeting, one of the P&Z members recommended a different, though not too different, kind of proposal, which is similar to the building height ordinance of the city of Austin. And that proposal is what I've been referring to in my memo to you today as a segment proposal. And so there was some discussion at P&Z last meeting whether or not the council would approve the hiring of an architect that might review the CRCRC proposed parallel plane model and the P&Z hasn't proposed this, it's been proposed by a member of the P&Z, the alternative proposal by a member of the P&Z. And so it seemed like a more tailored kind of outside review where each of those two proposals would be applied to a handful of lots in Rollingwood to show how the proposals would impact the lots. Each proposal, show the differences between the impact of the two proposals. Since then, I have given the what I'll call the segment proposal further review, and I'm after thinking about it with some depth of seriousness, I can no longer believe that it would be an appropriate proposal for Rollingwood. That is just my opinion, of course, and so I'm not saying it couldn't be tailored or amended or changed, but the bottom line now is that I have filed a memo in a diagram that explains my cautions about the segment proposal, that it might be used to help design a special exception that we've talked about with respect to parallel plane. But at this point, I would say that I would like to withdraw this item. That's a long way of saying I would like to withdraw this item from consideration. I don't think we're far enough along to know whether we'll have one or two proposals. The other options that we have would be whether we want to say yes and to say that we'll have an outside architect review whatever proposal comes out of planning and zoning for purposes of a public hearing, or we just take no action, and if and when a need arises, we bring this back for consideration.
Okay, I have a comment on this. Go ahead, you go first.
Oh, no. Okay, well, I'll just quickly, I don't have that much to say, but just the point, I don't mind, like, yeah, if we don't consider this meeting, that's fine, but I just am still very much believe that we need to have some meeting like this at some point when we have plans that we want an outside third party to like kind of look at, and because just think it's a good idea because it's pretty contentious. It feels like in the community, and I think just getting an outside, expert to like sort of look at it might just be helpful. And I would like us to do that at some point. That's all I have to say.
Well, I agree with you. I think that would be helpful, and especially if P&Z is asking for it, I would like to be supportive of their effort to, come to a good recommendation. And also, it's just part of the whole process of sort of letting everyone have their say in it, because ultimately, whatever they come up with comes back to us. And I understand your concerns with the segmented measuring proposal that Austin has to come up with a baseline for your height measurements. It might be problematic here. It might not, but I think if we let P&Z kind of go through whatever process they want to go through and give them whatever resources they want to do to work through all of that, then by the time it comes back to us, it'll probably be less contentious than it would otherwise be. And so I don't have a problem with that. I was going to say I was opposed to it at first because we have so many good architects on it, but I think you make a really good point, Alec, that since it is contentious, having somebody outside the community might be kind of helpful as a consultant. But before we approve that, I'd like to see a suggestion of who is the architect and what were their charges. So go get us a name and get us a price for consulting for X number of hours or whatever, and then let us consider it.
Yep.
And then I would also think we should call on Tony Stein if he's the one from P&Z. He's listening online if he's still.
This
alert.
was Michael Rhodes' proposal.
Oh, right, Michael
Yes,
Rhodes. Yeah. Okay. I forgot.
And but I'm happy to hear from Tony if anybody wants to comment on it. I think the notion here is that instead of taking this to K-Freeze, that we take it to an architect that has experience working with parallel plane models and have it probably less expensive than K-Freeze and more hands-on than K-Freeze and have a limited scope. I think it helps to, I think this proposal defines the scope of a third-party review better than we've done before.
And, I'm also kind of curious about hearing from somebody like Duke Garwood, who is an architect and does build things and applies these codes, and he's been on CRCRC, and I'd kind of like to hear his thoughts on it, and particularly as to who's being recommended.
Yes.
Because, he...
I think it's important to have it be somebody that's approved by both P&Z and CRCRC.
And I'd like to hear his comment on the necessity of it too, Garwood, because
Yeah.
basically his comment was it's not that hard to, it's not as hard as people think it is for an architect to look at these rules and apply them to plans, and we just follow them. That's what we do, is kind of pretty much the summary of what he told me his view was. And I don't want to speak for him, but I think it'd be helpful to kind of hear his input when we do get to the point of considering taking this step.
Okay. Any other, and I do have a clarification here, and then I'll recognize Mr. Stein. So, as posted, agenda item number 15 is Ms. Brown's posted agenda language. That agenda language, however, covered the two actual motions that were, was it one motion? A motion that was made and accepted by the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm going to have Ms. Wayman, and so totally respect Ms. Brown if she wants to move on and not make a motion on 15. However, you do as a council have before you the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that recommendation was?
It was to send a memo to City Council requesting an appropriation to evaluate proposals that include both the height restrictions on the way the ordinance is written and tenting. And I think staff interpreted that item to fit under the item that was put on the agenda, which is why we didn't put a separate item for this on there. But we do have a recommendation, like a live recommendation from them here before you all.
And you don't have to take action on that item that's before you from the Planning and Zoning Commission, but we wanted you to know that it is there and it does fall under 15.
And I'll say they didn't actually amend their motion to include this, but they did talk about the amount approximately that they thought it would cost, and I think they settled around the $3,000 area as a maximum, but that was not part of the motion. So that's not, required as part of the recommendation, but that was kind of what they discussed.
And they haven't picked an architect or heard from them
No.
on what it would cost.
They have not.
No.
So anyway, just want to have,
So
you have all the information in front of you. Yes, ma'am?
I think it's just premature to nail down what is to be done and with respect to what models it is to be done at this point.
Fair
You
enough.
know, if I could comment, I'm sorry to have so much discussion
No,
on
it's
this
fine.
stuff, but, one concern I have is that this process has gone on 1.5 years, and, if we say we're gonna delay approving their request, then that might add more months to this process. I'd be in favor of approving the request as long as they could get it done in the next X number of days. Like say, we'll give you $3,000 and you guys get that done in the next 45 days. If you can get it done in that time frame, or 60 days, or whatever it is, just to keep this whole process moving along.
Here's where I think we are. If we could approve that, but it wouldn't really be able to be implemented till we have a recommendation out of P and Z on whether they have an alternative proposal or whether they approve CRCRC proposal with changes. And we will have, after we have some action by P and Z, then we'll have open hearings at both P and Z and in front of the council. And so that's when I'm thinking we'll have nailed down the options a little better, and then have I think it'd be good to find someone in the meantime that can do this kind of review, but we don't have nailed down what review it's, the substance of the review. So
Tony's got his hand up.
Yeah, I'm going to recognize him
Okay.
momentarily. Okay. Mr. Stein, you're recognized.
Okay, can y'all hear me okay? My
Yes.
feed's kind of cutting in and out, so I don't know if I'll be cutting in and out as well.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay. I was just going to point out, I think Ms. Brown was speaking about the segmenting and comparing and contrasting to the parallel plane in the context of height. And I just wanted to point out that the entire discussion in our last meeting in November and Mike's proposal is related to segmenting for purposes of tinting, not for purposes of height. It was discussed that it could potentially be used for height down the road too, but Mike's main point was that, once you do the tinting, that's going to be probably the more restrictive, application to building, which includes height, obviously at some level, on the setbacks, and that will frankly take probably a lot of the air out of the height discussion, once you apply that for purposes of tinting. And I think the reason he came up with, that proposal is at our October meeting, when I think the planning and zoning had a majority vote to not approve the CRCRC height recommendations, as currently written. I know that me personally, the reason I didn't vote for it at that time was in large part, Alex Robinette was at that meeting and we were talking it through, and Mike raised, concerns about how the tinting as written currently under the parallel plane, whether that could even be practically designed to, enforced, et cetera, particularly without having any visuals of the actual tinting along a sloped lot. And that's what kind of set him forth on coming up with this. And we asked at that meeting, Alex, are you comfortable and confident that the tinting as written in the current CRCRC approval is good, solid, can be applied? And her answer was no. And I think that's why Mike went back and tried to come up, really think through how the tinting would work under the current CRC proposal. And that's what he came up with here. But all of our discussion at our last meeting was around that had to do with segmenting, specifically is segmenting as it relates to tinting, not segmenting as it relates to height, which I think is an important distinction.
Thank you, Tony. Any
Sure.
questions for Tony? Okay. Okay, council. What is your preference on 15?
Can you just bring back, like, if the recommendation, like, in 30 days or something? Like, I mean, if this disappears off of this today, it doesn't mean that we can't vote on the same recommendation at
That
some point in
is-
the future, right?
That is correct. Okay.
Um,
Okay, well, then I think it sounds to me like the thought is to allow P&Z to continue their work, and CRCRC as well, and we will move off of agenda item number 15 without action this evening, but knowing that it can and probably will come back in a very similar form. Are you good with that? Okay. With that, we'll move on to agenda item number 16, discussion and possible action on an amendment to the Code of Ordinances regarding connecting driveways. This is technically Ms. Brown's agenda item was requested last month. You do recognize this from last month's agenda item. We were asked to bring the item back this month, which we've done. In addition to that, to also have some additional research that was done by staff, I believe in coordination with PD.
Correct.
And that is in your packet. Ms. Wayman, do you want to add anything to that?
I
got
don't
it.
recall this being my item.
It is.
You had,
It's yours now.
well, it was instructions.
It-
It was instructions last month to bring it back this
To bring
month
it back.
with the information. You did not have to take action on it, but
Yes.
the requested information from last month is now in your packet. But I'm happy to move on.
Well, and I think, this is not, I was not prepared to present on this item.
It's not a
So
problem.
maybe
I'm-
what we should do is get ask the staff to briefly review the research and make a
That's-
recommendation.
you could- There we go.
There we go.
Look at that, stepping up.
Right, there you go. So, we looked at different ordinances in the local area as well as going out to University Park in Plano. But I'm not here to provide you a recommendation. I'm just saying that if you do approve this, is that what I'm asking for on the public safety side is that it be within that 30 feet, from the stop sign. So, but as you can see here, this is kind of a summarization of what is allowed at these cities.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
And with that, happy to leave it for you to digest over the next 30 days. If anyone wants to put it back on the agenda next month, just bring it on back and we'll put it back.
That's really funny because my parents are in Victoria, and there's a house in 2 years that's like a couple blocks down from theirs that has this. Supposedly,
It's
somehow they
not
got it through.
See it?
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll take no action on agenda item number 16 and move on to agenda item number 17. Discussion on the status and possible action on the scheduling of public hearings, including possible joint public hearings of the council and planning and zoning commission on the following proposed residential zoning ordinances. A, an ordinance designating that the front yard of a lot shall be the yard which abuts the addressed street. B, an ordinance addressing residential lighting and related provisions. C, an ordinance addressing residential fence height and related provisions. D, an ordinance addressing residential tree protection and amending the existing residential tree canopy protection ordinance. All of these items you will recognize from a long discussion that was had last month, and I will recognize Ms. Brown as it's her agenda item, but I do believe that Ms. Wayman is happy to provide an overall staff update on all of these items. However you would like to proceed, Ms. Brown.
Let's get the update from Ashley, and then I believe that there may be a few suggested edits to the various ordinances, and we can walk through that and then talk about how we want to schedule this for resolution at P&Z, and whether or not we want to have a joint public hearing or individual public hearings.
That sounds great. Well, yes, so all four ordinances are in the packet. A couple are in there twice. Some of them have some comments if there were some changes that were made in response to some council requests. And so we have put those documents here in the packet. Of course, we're open for any edits or discussion on those ordinances. Because they were just directed to go through the public hearing process, we did not interpret that as a joint public hearing for any of these. So the current staff plan, assuming everything is, okay with council, unless we're directed otherwise tonight, would be to take these before the Planning and Zoning Commission at their January 8th P&Z meeting. We do know they have a quorum already. We did have to push that meeting back a week because their regular meeting would have been on New Year's Day. So that got moved to January 8th, but they are available for that. And then our recommendation would be to hold the public hearing before the city council at the February city council meeting. It would be possible to hold that at the January city council meeting. The only concern would be is if P&Z did not make a recommendation for some reason on any of these ordinances, the city council then could not hold their public hearing, and we would have to possibly renotice. So our plan right now is to send out one big notice that says, hey, P&Z is going to talk about it on January 8th. City council is going to talk about it February 19th. Each of them will hold their respective public hearings, and that gives a little bit of wiggle room if for some reason P&Z does not make a recommendation at their January meeting. We don't anticipate that, but sometimes it happens, and so we wanted to kind of account for that at this time. That is, I guess, the recommendation on where these would go for public hearing. If there were to be a joint public hearing set, of course, that could be done by action of the city council today, and then we would just schedule those both for the same day, and that way it doesn't matter if P&Z makes their recommendation first, because they would just hold the joint public hearing first, then P&Z would have their time to do their recommendation before city council sees it.
Thank you, Ms. Wayman. Thanks for the update. Council, any questions for Ms. Wayman? And I'll recognize Ms. Brown.
I think.
I
Oh, I'm
was
sorry,
gonna
I
say,
apologize.
I like your the recommended timeline on this. I mean, no one wants to be doing anything next month. Starting at the beginning of January, I just think that the timeline makes sense for this, that you propose there, but that's just me. That's the only comment I have.
Good comment. Ms. Brown?
The first ordinance that's up for what I'll say is final cleanup before it goes to public hearing is the front yard ordinance. You've seen this a couple of times. There have been no recent changes to it. There have been no changes to it since the last time it came to the council. So I think this, unless there are comments tonight, I think this is ready to go back to P&Z for publication for a public hearing. I'm not seeing any changes to the front yard ordinance. The second ordinance is the changes to the residential code with respect to lighting. And if you look in your packet, there are two different documents. One, I think, is a non-ordinance form draft of the language with red lines, and then the second one is the draft of the ordinance in a clean version. So if you want to see what changed since the last time you saw that, you would be looking at pages 56 and 57, 56 through 58 of the packet. It starts at the top with section 107-5. I have received 2 edits on the second page of that document. But I believe that in the clean version, those edits have been picked, one of those edits, let's see, one of the edits has been picked up. So in the ordinance form of this, which is pages 59 to 63 of the packet, are y'all with me?
Yep.
I would propose on line 91, the extra space before the 1 be removed.
Yeah, okay.
And then on, at line 131, there needs to be the word by, BY, between controlled and A, so that it would read, light fixtures shall be controlled by a timer that restricts activation to nighttime use only. And since all of these requirements are new requirements, there's no underlining in the ordinance form of this ordinance. There's no redlining in the ordinance form, so, because it's all new language. Is that correct? Okay. So,
Can you point us to the part of the ordinance that allows like security lights if they're on a motion detector?
that would be on that is the that under, if you start at paragraph D, line 115.
115.
The standards apply to, and then at line 131, it says light fixtures shall be controlled by a timer that restricts activation to nighttime use only.
But that's all light fixtures.
Mhm.
And I guess I'm looking for a provision that allows motion-activated security lights. Like Westlake's got one that says you can have motion-activated security lights, but they also have to have a timer that goes off after 10 minutes. Like I've got a Ring security light on my driveway, which is great because people have broken into my car twice in the driveway. And so now with this Ring camera, it's got motion-activated security lights that will come on, light up the car, but they're on a brief timer, goes off in actually like 1
There-
minute.
I think here there's not a prohibition on motion-activated lights. There's just a requirement that they be controlled by a timer.
I
So
don't
it
know
could
that that's true because all lights have to be shielded and you can't have a pointed light source visible, and a security light is not shielded. And it's actually, those types of security lights are diagrammed in the illustration of prohibited lighting. And I think we're gonna have an allowance for motion-activated security lights that go off after a certain period of time. And we just don't have that. That I could see.
I think this was Mr. Von Bavel. Does he have a, do you know the answer to that, Mr. Bench?
I do not, don't believe that we handled it exactly the way Mr. Lucien is asking, but I think that it's a reasonable thing to add, a reasonable amendment.
I don't have any problem with it either. Can we draft the language here tonight so that we don't have to
I
go
think-
through 2 more?
I think
Yeah.
if we
But
if
what-
you just gave
yeah.
us what you wanted, how you if we wanted to specifically allow for that, I think we
Yes.
can draft that language on the back end and have that ready for public hearing. If you said we want to allow for
Yeah.
motion activated security
I-
lights,
Well,
Yeah,
we
meeting
have,
next
we
month.
have another meeting
Yeah, we have
before
another
the
meeting.
public hearing too, so.
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I just think that's something we could easily draft if you just told us what you wanted it to say.
Yeah, if it just says that it allows motion-activated security lights, so long as they're on a timer that they go off after,
Like no more than 15 minutes. We have that
I would say no more
elsewhere.
than 10.
Okay.
Well,
They'll keep
I have
tripping
a,
if this one gets rid of
That's
it.
true. The deer set them off, that's the
Yeah.
problem.
Because planning and zoning will still take a bite at this apple, so.
Well, I just thought it would mention it, even if it just goes to planning and zoning with a message to add that, because I just don't want it to send it over there and then have them start picking at it, cause it doesn't have that.
Well, here's my, I
Okay.
have a proposal.
Okay.
That we add in paragraph C, which is exemptions, after line 113, a number 13 that says motion, this would exempt motion activated security lights that are controlled by a timer that deactivates after no more than 10 minutes.
Sounds good.
How long does your ring camera stay on?
Like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And I think this has gone through P and Z previously, so.
We can bring it back.
And I may,
There wouldn't be a need to take it back to P and Z until it goes through the public hearing process. It will have that new language in it. At that time, anyone can raise any concerns.
and it may be, if we look at D4,
Here, let's
line
do
129.
let's do your first one as a motion while it's still fresh.
well, this is related to that.
Okay.
D4 at line 129 says light fixtures may be controlled by a motion detector that deactivates fixtures after no more than 15 minutes. I'm just now seeing that language there, but I don't think that's necessarily specific enough to address the security lights. So
What line is it?
it is line 129 and 130.
Okay.
Someone did think of it, pretty much.
It doesn't address the shielding though. So
Oh, yeah, you're right.
I think exempting motion activated security lights under the exemptions will better cover your issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I would move that ordinance, I guess we don't have a number yet. The ordinance amending chapter 107 with respect to exterior lighting requirements. Add the language in subparagraph C exemptions, add a new paragraph 13 that states motion activated security lights that are controlled by a timer that deactivates the light after no more than 10 minutes.
You have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown, a second by Mr. McDuffie. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries.
And then we also had an amendment on line 131 to add the word BY between controlled and A.
You have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Have a motion by Ms. Brown, a second by Ms. Hudson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. All right.
The next draft up for your final edits is,
So, could I ask a quick question on this one before we move on? In D8, where it says landscape yard lighting, light fixtures used for illuminating landscape features shall not be used after 11 p.m. Do we have, I don't know that there's anywhere in there that talks about light fixtures that are light activated. I have some solar landscape lights, little ones like next to the path or whatever, that come on when it gets dark. But I don't turn them on and I don't turn them off. And so they don't turn off at 11 o'clock.
We do have a line at 131 there. Light fixtures shall be controlled by a. That's the one that we need to add by a timer that restricts activation to nighttime use only. So I think that would cover the ones that come on when it gets dark. At least that's my understanding of it. I know it doesn't say landscape lighting, but
But you're saying they're supposed to go off at 11 is? the
Well,
problem?
what's the distinction between those? I guess maybe 8 says the use for illuminating landscape features. I mean, what does that mean? You know, is it illuminating my driveway access and my sidewalks and the front steps or whatever? Is that
And
a landscape feature?
But is a playhouse a landscape feature? I think a path is a
And do you
landscape
really need to have government regulate lighting after 11 o'clock? Also an option.
Yeah, I don't know about the,
How's
All the
that,
lighting.
how's that gonna be enforced?
I'm not, yeah.
well, I don't have a problem with the lighting that's shielded. People leave it on all the time as long as it's not a spotlight that's shining in my windows. I don't care if they leave it on. Do y'all?
I don't.
So why don't we just get rid of the turn it off at 11 deal if it's all shielded anyway?
I figured it had something to do with the dark sky thing.
Well, we're allowed to do it because of the dark sky thing. Like we can't be more restrictive than dark sky. There are. Dave knows. David's thoughts.
Dave Bench, 1 Randolph. We put the 11 o'clock restriction on there because there are some lights in this listing here that are not shielded, the string lights, for instance. And those things are exempted from shielding, but we also want to insist that they get turned off at 11 o'clock.
midnight for string lights.
Oh, excuse me, thank you.
They get an
So-
extra hour.
Yeah.
Party nights.
So, that's right. So, and two, there's even decorative lights for seasonal decorative lights. We wanted to put in there a provision that would require you to shut them off at some point.
Christmas lights.
Yes.
Yeah, but this one actually is about landscape yard lighting.
Oh.
So,
Well, can we do a straw poll on how we feel about telling people they have to turn off Christmas lights at 11 o'clock?
There's an exemption for Christmas lights.
That
There's
has
an
an
It's
exemption.
for seasonal decorating lights.
Okay.
So what has to go off at 11?
Light
light on
fixtures
your-
used for illuminating landscape features.
I think we
That are not
delete,
seasonal.
I think we have to delete that.
I'm fine deleting it, but that's 2.
Well, I just wanted to have it clarified, because there are some people have light fixtures in their trees and in the, all over the place.
As long as they're
As-
shielded and they're not the string lights that go off at 11 or 12, I'm sorry, then I think we delete the requirement that landscape lighting be turned off at 11. I think that's going to upset people if we tell them they got to turn them off, because a lot of them use them for security.
right.
Well, that was the one
Correct.
thing I
Well,
was
no,
worried about.
this doesn't apply except if you're changing your light fixtures.
Yeah, I
And
know,
builds.
but still, people want to leave their, like, the tree lights on sometimes all night for security. A lot of people do. A lot of my neighbors do. I walk my dog at 11 o'clock at night.
It helps to illuminate the cameras.
It's just too widely adopted. I think people are gonna get very upset if we tell them they gotta turn off their landscape lighting at 11 o'clock at night.
Is that a motion? I'm happy to
Yes,
take
it's
a
a
motion.
motion. Just strike that.
You have a
Strike D8 in its entirety.
What line are you on?
138 through 140.
Yes, correct. Motion to strike D8 in its entirety, line
Then
138
you're
through.
also eliminating
You're eliminating the
the
lemon.
lumens.
Yeah, I don't know
level.
about that. I don't know why that had to be together.
Yeah,
but-
why don't we just delete, the section 8, landscape yard lighting through, shall not be used after 11 PM period, and leave individual fixtures shall not exceed 530 lumens.
Well, I think what you do is say, light fixtures used for illuminating landscape features shall not exceed 530 lumens.
There you go, that's
Yeah,
better,
that's good.
that's better.
Is that your motion of her words?
Yes, she said it better.
You have a motion by Mr. Glasheen. Is there a second?
Um,
Well, she was gonna like go with it.
She wrote it.
Second.
You have a motion by Mr. Machine, a second by Mr. Robinson. They are the words of Ms. Brown.
Yeah, and they would be required to be shielded, so
Yeah.
that's good, yeah. I'm good
Further
with that.
discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Thank
I
you.
guess this is a good exercise, now we're reading them. All right, anything more on lighting? The next one is fences. This is an ordinance that would say, and I don't know where if this came out of CRCRC, or P and Z, but it says that, the standard allowable fence height is up to 8 feet. A fence higher than 8 feet requires, a special exception to be granted by the Board of Adjustment and must be engineered.
That came from the P and Z and CRCRC at 6 feet, and the city council direction
Yeah,
last
to
month
say we
was to
changed it.
change it to 8
Yeah, I
feet.
remember.
Yeah.
And so that's why it became 8 feet.
I like the idea of 8 feet, and I think Kevin really liked it too.
I did.
Well, I guess we all voted
We
for it.
did,
voted
we all
yes.
voted for it.
Okay, all right, any further edits on the fence ordinance? So approved in its,
We're
approved in its
libertarians.
proposed final form. The next one is the residential tree canopy ordinance. And we have two versions of this ordinance. One has redlining with comments. And Ashley, what's the second one?
Just a clean one.
The second one should just be the clean version.
Okay,
It
and the
does
second one
not-
is the clean version.
It's more about the comments, I guess, that we left. They're the same, but the comments in the first document show why things were changed.
All right. And
I can briefly walk through those changes after the last meeting if you'd like, if that's helpful.
okay, I'll walk through, to shorten this up, I would suggest that I walk through the ones that I'd like the council to give attention to. And, then, as opposed to all of them. And we'll assume that everyone is okay with all of them unless someone speaks up. The rest, the ones that we don't discuss. Okay, the first, change I have is, on line 135, and this is the first version. Line 135, it's subparagraph G. And the comment is that the language is that, removal means an act that causes or may reasonably expected to cause a tree to die, including, and then there's a list of actions. Are y'all with me? Okay. The comment is that the arborist says this is unenforceable. In my view, this would be enforceable, because we've listed the types of actions that might be expected to cause a tree to die. But I think it could be improved by adding the word means and insert intentional act that may reasonably be expected to cause a tree to die, so that it's not an accident, you didn't hit it with your Jeep because you forgot to leave your parking brake on and it rolled down and hit the tree, or something of that nature.
That's a good edit. I think, we didn't propose any changes because we felt the same way. It was existing language that we didn't feel that would need to be changed, but I like the addition of,
I think the intentional means, we've got, the city to enforce has to prove a specific act that was reasonably connected to the death of the tree, the death. The next one is on the following page, and the comment is with respect to the language in paragraph A2, which has to do with the removal it's the prohibition on removing a heritage tree. And the exception being a finding by the Board of Adjustment. And the comment is that this overlaps, section B1 below, but section B1 below has to do with what happens if there is an emergency that requires removal of part or all of a heritage tree. So I read those two provisions as being distinct.
Yes, the comment was not that we felt like they conflicted. I think what we thought the direction was last month was to take out the ability to have this removal special exception and instead use the language that we used in the commercial document to do this one that's here in B1 that was added. But we just felt like we could keep both, and that was okay. And that's what the comment was intended to say was, you know, we tried to accomplish that goal, but this section was left in because the commercial code had both options. So we're okay with having both of those.
I think they do different things, and I think they are both needed.
Right,
in my opinion.
agreed.
Brooke, can we go back to the 135? I've got an issue with the adding of intentional, because I just think we're trying to, that muddies the water of determining somebody's state of mind or intent, which we have no way of knowing. I understand. I just don't think it's necessary to add intentional.
I think maybe she was trying to make it where, because
Well,
the
yeah.
comment was like, what, like, oh, you can't, like, it's not enforceable reasonably, so maybe that, I mean, I don't know, I understand what you're saying.
I just,
So you're saying, like, leave it the way it was before and just ignore the comment on the side?
Well, because negligent, you don't want somebody to do something that's negligent or that causes the same problem, which
No.
maybe they didn't intend to kill the tree, but they,
I know, but I mean, if you're,
You could negligently
agreeing with you.
not
Yeah.
water your tree, and then it dies, and then, you know, are you penalized for that? So I think the intentional requirement's good. I think it helps make the ordinance more clear about what we're trying to do.
We could say an intentional act or failure to act.
I don't know, what would be an intentional failure to act that would cause
You
a tree?
water
to
the
die?
tree.
Not watering a tree.
Well, I don't think, that's my point, was we don't wanna go that far, I don't think.
Yeah, cause I've probably almost pulled trees, not an accident this summer.
Yeah. Yeah, if it's too easy to kill a tree by accident.
I can go either way, y'all. Just make a decision.
I liked your suggestion, but I don't think it matters that much, so I don't feel strongly about it. Do you feel strongly about it?
I did. Otherwise, I wouldn't have looped us back.
Okay.
I just think when you're adding language like that, where you're getting to somebody's state of mind.
Lawyers have to prove that all the time.
Yeah, we do that all the time.
Well,
Every
Probably not a lawyer,
criminal
so.
act, you have to prove intent.
Or we could have willful, wanton, reckless, or
not that-
malicious. We
it's
could
not
add
that
that.
odd.
you know,
Yeah,
it could have said I accidentally cut down this tree because I thought it was this other tree.
Accidentally got drunk and ran into that car.
It doesn't, you know.
So
Well, you haven't taken an action on it yet, so if you don't want to take an action, you don't have to. If you want to move on,
I don't care.
I'll leave it to the lawyers. I don't care.
okay.
But, I mean,
Okay, well,
Muddy.
it sounds like we're skipping that one. Was there something else, Ms. Brown?
Well, we were in the middle of discussing,
Or you needed to leave those two sections.
Oh, yeah, we were gonna leave the
I
two
think
sections.
I think we wanna keep, my recommendation is to keep them both.
Got it. Okay.
Then the next change is in, in line, 334, And the change, I would say that certified arborist has been stricken and city development officer added. I think that might have been an error. I think we need to keep certified arborist there, because this is something the applicant will be proving to the city. If the city development officer determines that an emergency existed at the time of removal that necessitated expedited removal, or the applicant provides documentation from you don't want city development officer, you want certified arborist there.
Noted. That's correct. We'll change that.
And then,
I think I'm gonna treat that as a typo,
yes,
because I think
Yes.
you're correct about that.
I would
Is
agree.
that like F2, the section?
And then, the next comment is on lines 401 to 407. And the comment says that the arborist doesn't agree with the use of the word, quote, ensure. Best chance of survival would be better language. And so this reads, the protection plan submitted for these trees to include evidence that sufficient care must be demonstrated to ensure the best chance of survival of these protected trees. This is in the grading and tree protection plan. The plan submitted for these trees is to include, I think there needs to be a verb there, is to include evidence that sufficient care, I would say the plan is to include sufficient evidence that sufficient care will be taken instead of must be demonstrated to ensure the best chance of survival. Or you could say the protection plan submitted for these trees must demonstrate actions for the best chance of survival. It just needs a little grammar there, unless I'm missing the arborist comment.
Which version do you prefer, the first or the second that you provide? Either one I agree with is a better reading
wording.
than it reads, yeah.
Okay, I think the second, the protection plan submitted for these trees must demonstrate actions necessary for and then strike from to include through ensure. So it would read, the protection plan submitted for these trees must demonstrate actions necessary for the best chance of survival.
Should it say include instead of demonstrate? Because an action plan can't demonstrate something, it can only include the actions.
Include action.
The
I think
protection
either
plan
works.
must include, okay,
Protection plan submitted.
actions necessary for, I like it.
Gotcha.
And then at line 419, the language is the tree removal permit shall not be approved prior to the building permit. I think it should be prior to approval of the building permit. And those are the only changes I had in the tree canopy and protection ordinance.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone else have any other.
Mine is more of a general comment that I understand, we protect heritage oaks from being cut down. And then we have another class of trees which are protected trees that have to be replaced if they're removed. And I don't really, see any provision in there for saving trees that are, not in the building envelope other than heritage oaks. And I think we should consider prohibiting removal of some more protected trees of some class, you know, if they're in the list of desirable trees and they're larger than whatever particular diameter is, it may vary by species, because it seems like only heritage oaks get as large as the 24 inches we're talking about. But, you know, for example, red oak trees or Spanish oaks is another nice tree. Cedar elm is another excellent tree here. Bur oaks are a great tree.
I mean, do we have a lot of those? I mean,
We do.
yeah.
We have quite a
We have a
few.
lot of red
Cedar
oaks.
A lot
elms?
of red oaks and a lot of cedar elms. They're as common
Cedar
as,
elms.
I would say they're close to as common as live oaks. And most of the stuff that grows down in the drainages are cedar elms. And those are all great trees. And, you know, if there's those nice trees are in the setback between the houses particularly, in my opinion, or they're just not in the building envelope, it's like, do we really want those things to be cut and replaced with artificial turf for a putting green? You know, it just seems like there might be some more trees we want to protect from being removed. I don't know. This has already gone through CRCRC, and they grappled with this and tried to strike a balance, I'm sure, between, you know, people's ability to use the property as they want to versus the common good of having a well-treed neighborhood. But I would land that compromise a little bit more on protecting more trees personally, but I don't know where you draw those lines, and that's something that, you know, P&Z's got to address. You guys have already considered it. I don't know if you have any thoughts you want to share on it now, but.
And I think, and I'm gonna kind of guide us back to, I'm fine with us kind of fine tuning the actual language before it goes to public hearing. But I'll say on that point, I think an opportunity to discuss those issues in public hearing and maybe make some additions or happy to do that in that public hearing process. I'm fine with kind of fine tuning what goes to public hearing, but I do kind of want to get us back to that.
And I just wanted to flag that issue.
I would agree with you, Councilmember Glasheen, that, on looking at that, trees in the setback, protecting additional trees in the setback. But I don't have a good, idea of the kinds of changes, Charlie, that can be made to an ordinance at public hearing or subsequent to public hearing. What's the boundary? Any changes, so long as it's within the general subject matter?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, then I think maybe we
Okay.
try to get comment and tee that up for the
Yeah.
public hearing.
Okay.
Okay, any other changes, any other comments on the tree canopy ordinance?
Okay.
Okay,
I think Dave has it.
Is this homework for me?
one moment and let us get a motion off on this. I would move approval of the tree canopy ordinance with the changes that have been discussed.
You have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown, a second by Mr. Robinson.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Love the collaboration down there. So,
Do we need to clarify, because we're not really approving the ordinance?
Approving for submission for public hearing.
yeah,
Thank you.
that's a clarification of the motion. Approval for clarification for the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Thank you, council. Anything additional on 17? Not hearing.
I think Mr. Bench had
Oh, okay.
comments.
I guess I heard some discussion here about hardening some of the provisions for protected trees. And I want to be sure that, is this an assignment to come back to us?
No,
It's just for discussion at
Do
the
you want
public
me to?
hearing.
I just wanted to flag the issue for everybody to think about, so when we do have a public hearing, if you have any thoughts that you want to share about it, or any commentary, background, explanation you want to give from y'all's previous deliberations, we can deal with it then. This is,
At public
I'm
hearing.
just, I'm just flagging it now, so everyone will have it on their radar for when the public hearing happens.
Thanks for that clarification.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 18, discussion and possible action on a resolution casting votes for the Travis County Appraisal District Board of Directors. I'll recognize Ms. Wayman. I do think council, you may have all received a nice email, introductory email if you didn't already know John. It is my recommendation that we will be going, or that you cast your votes for John, and I'll let Ms. Wayman explain further.
You pretty much covered it. In the past, the city council has cast their votes for Mr. Havenstreit. He is the only person on the list who was nominated from an overlapping jurisdiction of Rollingwood, Eanes ISD, and we have prepared the attached resolution. That's kind of why we had to do a little bit of this ahead of time, was because we needed to pass a formal resolution, and so attached is draft resolution 2024-1120-18, casting all 5 of the city's votes for Mr. Havenstreit.
And I can attest, he's a great guy and did a great job on during his service on Eanes ISD Board of Trustees. So anyway, happy to have a motion.
Move approval of resolution 2024-11-2018, casting our votes for John Havenstreit for TCAD Board of Directors.
You have a motion by Ms. Hudson. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Hudson, a second by Mr. Robinson. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. 5 ayes, no nays. Motion carries. Thank you, council. Moving on to agenda item number 19, discussion and possible action regarding the acceptance of drainage easements for the Hubbard-Hatley-Pickwick Drainage Project. Recognize Ms. Wayman to explain this issue.
So we did post this as drainage easements, though we do only have one easement. We weren't sure if possibly between the time of posting and now if we could possibly have an additional easement, but the city has been granted, or we have secured an easement from 2800 Hubbard Circle as part of the Hubbard-Hatley-Pickwick Drainage Project. These do need to be approved, I guess, accepted by city council before they're formally considered approved. And I will say that this is not the last one that we need to complete everything in that project. There is one more that would be required in order to complete the segment that runs along 2800 Hubbard Circle, but we are still actively trying to get that easement from the other property owner. So at this time, this is the only easement we have received.
This is good progress on a very long and arduous task of trying to complete this project, and there's lots of sordid history with that this goes back to. I would encourage you to accept the easement. We'll continue to seek the other easement, whether we have both easements or not. I mean, there's a chance that we won't do this small segment if we don't get the additional easement, but we will continue on with that project as you're all aware of, and that we're continuing to make progress on. So happy to have a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would move approval of the easement for the utility easement, drainage easement for 2800 Hubbard Circle.
You have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown, a second by Ms. Hudson. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Thank you, council. And with that, we will move to executive session. I will call up agenda item number 20, executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.071, discussion with city attorney regarding Steve Marcy and Norman Marcy versus City of Rollingwood et al. And with that, we will go into executive session at 9:48 p.m. The city council will come back to order out of executive session at 10:24 p.m. No action was taken in executive session on agenda item number 20. And with that, we will move off of agenda item number 20, and I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
You have a motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. 5 ayes, no nays. You are adjourned. Thank you, council.